Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's the Cryptid Huntress. I'm Jessica Jones. And man, do we have a really cool show for you guys today. Man, this one's kind of creeping me out, actually. So, do mannequins make you guys uncomfortable? They do me sometimes. Okay, I do get uncomfortable around things that look human, but they're not quite human. Okay. Actually, they're not human at all. And that's why I am team human when it comes to the transhumanist movement and robots. I prefer actual organic humans, you guys. When I am having interactions with people, I have come across several people in my lifetime that did not seem to be completely human, actually. And if you are experiencing the same things that I am, then you have experienced what they call there's actually a Japanese scientist that came up with this term, but it's called the Uncanny Valley. And we're going to be talking about that today. I think it has a whole lot to do with a lot of these topics that we get into here on the channel, including imposters and missing people. We're also going to get into this topic as well today. There is a pretty famous UFC MMA fighter. He's retired now, but his name is BJ Penn. I've followed him since he was a young buck in the UFC, and he has recently, in the past week, I believe, has claimed that his mother and his brother were unalived by the government, and imposters have taken their place. And he's serious, very serious about it. And I have some pictures to show you guys today. We got a lot to talk about, y'all. Wouldn't that be just terrifying if one day your family just wasn't really your family? Gosh, there's even a cartoon about that. It's called Coraline. Have y'all seen Coraline with the buttons for the eyes in the alternate parallel reality? Man, it's almost like BJ Penn is living in an alternate reality, according to what he's claiming right now, is that his brother and his mother are not who they say they are, and they've been replaced. All right. Well, in the world of clones and cloning, doppelgangers, it's possible. It's absolutely possible. So we're going to dive into all this today. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you to all my mods. We have a wonderful chat already today. That is blowing up. You guys are the best. If you guys would like to go check out my social media sites and get any information or get the archives of all my shows, go over to my website. That's thecryptidhuntress.com. You can find all my shows there. If you guys would like to support my channel and my work, I do have a Patreon. That's the Cryptid Huntress on Patreon, and I have a shop. It's called War Woman Goods over on Etsy. So thank you guys so much for all your support. It's much appreciated. Okay. Well, also, I do have a couple of events coming up, and I figured I'd show you some posters. I do have a couple. This one that's coming up next, I do have what is it called? The Myrtle Beast Bigfoot Fest. That's coming up next month, May the 9th and 10th. It's actually mostly May 10th in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So y'all come see me at that. It's going to be a good time. And then in July, I do have the Full Disclosure Now conference. They got a lot of people speaking at that again this year down in St. Petersburg, Florida. So if you guys would like to come see me live, those are two events that you can catch me at. And there's more. It's on my calendar, okay, on my website. But those are two of the big ones that I got coming up next. All right. Okay. Well, let's get to our show, you guys. I have our good friend, Dr. Dennis Carroll, here with us again today. He is one of my resident experts on so much that we talk about, including doppelgangers and imposters and changelings as well. The uncanny valley is a theory in aesthetics suggesting a humanoid object appearing almost, but not exactly, like a real human can evoke feelings of eeriness and revulsion, rather than familiarity, due to the object's proximity to reality, yet it's not quite real. Some examples are going to be robots, 3D computer animations like cartoons, lifelike dolls, and robot like animatronics. Y'all remember the animatronics? I think I got a deep-seated fear of animatronics and maybe the uncanny valley when I used to go to Showbiz Pizza as a kid. Okay. And that mouse with the cheerleading pom-poms, that she was way too human like. Okay. And can this actually be connected also to Bigfoot as well and aliens? Because I tell you what, when I've encountered ETs, for example, they look kind of human, but they kind of weren't. Okay. And that's a little odd as well. So when we encounter something that or someone that's a bit off, discomfort does set in. It manifests an unsettling feeling in the pit of our stomachs. Oh my gosh, my computer just pulled that up. Now that's creepy. That's creepy. Oh, I have two computers open. That's what just happened, y'all. I was going to wait to show y'all that, but now you can see what I'm going to talk about before I show it. Okay, but it seems a bit off. Discomfort sets in. It manifests an unsettling feeling in the pit of our stomach. It's a reaction born from the clash between expectation and reality. Psychological response to an almost human entity falling short of complete authenticity. We're studying this today. Dr. Carroll is here with me. He has decades of experience with the paranormal, demonology. We might need to be exercised after this show. Okay. And UFOs, cryptids, you name it. He covers it, and he has a fantastic YouTube channel. It's called Hunting the Shadows, and a Patreon as well. You guys, please go over and support him on all of his outlets. Please help me welcome to the show our good friend, Dr. Dennis Carroll. Hey, Dennis.
Good afternoon.
Hey, how are you?
You know, I was looking in the mirror this morning, and just for a minute, there was an old guy looking back at me. I don't know who it was. Anyway.
Did you not recognize yourself today?
Speaking of possession, if you don't pay the exorcist, do you get repossessed? There you go.
I don't know. You probably do. Maybe so. I don't know. That's funny though, actually. That's some
hazard,
exorcism jokes. Dark humor. Yeah. Well, I accidentally pulled up that picture of those really creepy mannequins. Did you see that when I pulled those up? That was creepy. And I don't know about you, Dennis, but ever since I was a kid, I've had kind of a weird, deep-rooted fear of clown dolls. Okay. Clowns and mannequins and things that just, it's almost like you feel like they're going to come to life, but they don't, right?
Absolutely. You know, I think that, you know, I've said that statement a lot of times in the past. You know, there's a lot of things out there walking around. They look human, but they're not really human. And I think we pick up on that. I think we've got some kind of built-in high strangeness meter in us, you know, that we can kind of pick up on something when it's not quite right. There's something off about it. I actually shook hands with a guy like that once. You know it right off the bat, you know, when you step into that uncanny valley that you know, phrase we've coined on that, you know, you're in unfamiliar ground. There's something that's quite not right, that's off with it. And it gives you a very unsettling feeling. Like you said, it kind of gets, you know, the pit in the stomach feeling, you know, you don't like this. It's definitely something that's touching, I think, you spiritually in a way, you know?
Oh yeah. It's like I said, like a deep-rooted fear. And speaking of deep-rooted fears, I just saw that, Robin, and there's other people in the chat saying they just had a big old earthquake in California. So thoughts and prayers are going out to all y'all. Please stay safe out there. And I'm sorry to hear that, man. We just can't catch a break lately. We got all these disasters going on around the world, and we're over here talking about creepy mannequins today. And just to make your day a little more bright, everybody. Okay, but please stay safe out there, y'all. And okay, let me go back and show a couple of other pictures here, because does this make you uncomfortable, Dennis, seeing things like that? This mannequin.
Yeah, that looks very robotic looking. That's what
Mhm.
makes you feel, I think, so uncomfortable when you see something like that. It looks human, but you know it's not human. You know?
And you're just waiting for it to take a breath or to blink an eye.
Mm.
And the one, okay, some of the mannequins, now I don't know if this is an AI image, I found this online. Some of the more terrifying mannequins that I remember seeing growing up had their mouths open. And it looked a lot like this.
Well,
These are these are the worst ones.
this has been featured on the Twilight Zone a lot. There were several episodes about this. One was a mannequin that would come to life and then, try to go out in the world and be like people. But she would have to come back. She kept being drawn back to the store because deep inside she knew she was only a mannequin, not real, not really human. And look at those images. I mean, that's very much like, I think, this deep seated fear that people have of clowns, because there it is again. It's something that appears slightly human, but it's not. And
Well,
that,
that's
that,
right.
yeah, that's a distinct fear for a lot of people.
It is. And it did not help when Ghost Adventures crew went to the Clown Motel in Nevada. And this is the actual clown, I do believe, at that motel. And you can stay there, by the way. All the rooms are clown themed. It is not a place I would ever go. Not
And the
even to
same
do
thing
ghost
goes
hunting. I would
to
not.
same thing goes with dolls as well. Just dolls, yeah, freak us out.
Yes, dolls do. And that's why, people have haunted dolls. And these right here are no different. Now, I'm showing a picture from the Clown Motel in Nevada. That clown, if you go and watch Ghost Adventures on this episode, that clown moves by itself during the show. Its hand actually drops down off of its knee. Okay, it was sitting there like a human, and as Zach is sitting there watching it, it moves. And that is the case also with dolls sometimes, Dennis. Now you're into haunted objects and the paranormal and the supernatural. What would cause something like that to move?
It could. Certain items, and I've run into this in demonology. Certain items can be influenced, infernally influenced by outside forces. They can also. I'm not going to say it's possession of these things, but it is a distinct influence over it, because you can't possess something that's not alive usually, but
Mhm.
you can mannequinize something, and that's the term I've heard used. Mannequinize. It's almost like using it in place of a human being to accomplish things that you want to get done. You can run into this situation, and a lot of times there are supposed to be certain occult rituals that can place souls in, dolls and statues and certain things like that, and spirits supposedly can become trapped in these objects as well, sort of like Dybbuk boxes.
Mhm. Yeah, so I guess it's an interesting place to know that a soul would be, because it just looks like a humanoid. Okay, it's like a miniature human, or even in that case of the clown, it's a life size humanoid. And that's where we come into this uncanny valley. Okay, and I want to talk about the history of what the uncanny valley is, because a lot of people may not have heard about it. But see, Dennis, there's a trend on TikTok right now, and it is really creepy because it's mostly women are doing what they call uncanny valley makeup. Okay. And this is something that, if you look at them, and they like walking down the street at night and scaring people and just standing there and seeing if people have a reaction to it. But a lot of these women, let me see if I can get a picture. Here we go. Here's one example right here. It looks human, but it's a little off. I think that first picture on the far side, with the white turtleneck, that's the creepiest one, I think. Okay, and it's almost like a figure or a doll or something like that. People are doing this for fun. They think it's funny. Dennis, how do you feel about it?
That would have to definitely freak you out to run into someone like that. That would not be good.
Yes. No, it would not. I know, though. I don't know, but for Halloween, it'd be perfect. Okay, but if I see somebody like this walking around during the day, and I've written some interesting characters in my time, um, I would be freaked out just a little bit. Probably, it would take me a second to assess the situation, and I think that's exactly what the whole point of it is like to take that pause and you let your body detect, like, is this real or not? Is this a person or is this something other? Okay. Which is wild. Coming from a cryptid field researcher, you and I both, Dennis, we're out there looking for things that aren't supposed to exist. And when you see something that doesn't exist, it's not supposed to, but it does, like an extraterrestrial,
Unfortunately,
there's something, alarms go off inside.
We find some things like that once in a while that are not supposed to exist, definitely. But and you're giving me a good idea of a Halloween costume here. But definitely, that would be very unsettling, and they know that's unsettling. This is a fear that they're playing off of. Okay, Hollywood's good at that. That's why I always say they're very good at stressing your emotions out too. When before the monster comes on the scene in the movie, they start playing the spooky music. They start, manipulating your emotions, and that's what this is. This is manipulating your fear to a certain extent by showing you something that looks human, but it's not.
Yes, it's very psychological, isn't it? It's like a psychological thriller or something, or a horror. Okay, psychological horror is in having something that's not quite human. But speaking of psychological horrors, what about robots? Okay, we have all this whole, I mentioned the transhumanist movement, and I'm team human. But right now we've got this, there's it's almost like a threshold. Okay, we're in this threshold right now. It's like, well, do we step into like this fully robotic movement, this era of just robotics and it being so normalized to have robots in our society walking amongst us and working amongst us and taking our jobs and all that kind of stuff. It's wild because they're putting human skins, as my son calls them, human skins. I guess that's a PlayStation term or video game term, but putting skin suits on robots. Okay, and we're having to us, we think it'd be easy to decipher what's human and what's robotic, but we may not be.
It's a sort of a reverse skinwalker type thing. Instead of appearing as something else, they're appearing as human, okay, or trying to appear that way. Actually, I have had demonic cases over the years. So we have run into demonic entities that were masquerading as humans. I've seen some one time that actually tried to masquerade as children. But there's always something off about them. These images that they try to put forward, they're never perfect. They might, one eye might be slightly different than the other. There are differences. There are definite seeable differences in these things when you look at them, and you know that what you're looking at is fake. It's not real. It's a facsimile of what it's trying to appear to be, and that is definitely, I think an inherent fear in us to a certain extent that we're dealing with something that's no longer human. It's just like coming upon a wild animal in the forest. I've run into bears and mountain lions myself. After all the research I've done out in the woods and stuff, you got to deal with it in a different way. You're not dealing with a human being, okay? And you're used to that, because we deal with human beings on a daily basis, constantly. And when something's not right with that really gets us. That's really an instinctive thing, I think, in us as well.
It is, and there's all these movies that are coming out with and I say animatronics. Okay, animatronics. I say that because of the whole. And Donna says something about animatronics here, but the Showbiz Pizza, Chuck E. Cheese. I don't know if y'all had those all over the country. We had them here in Georgia. And when I was a kid, it was that darn. I tried to pull up a picture and I couldn't get it to upload before the show. But that mouse with those pom poms, she was a cheerleader, and I was just waiting for her to step down off that stage because she looked like she was real to me. Now, Dennis, they have a movie that I took my son. My son wanted to go see this movie. We never go to the theater, but I took him about a year ago to see Five Nights at Freddy's, I think. And it's kind of like an adaptation of those animatronics on stage, but they're all embodied. I'm not trying to give the movie away, but the souls of dead children have been put into these things. Okay. Just like you're talking about with the, possessing the dolls and animatronics. So anyways.
Here's the thing with me when it comes to statues and things like that. It's kind of like the old saying about the picture hanging on the wall or the eyes following you. Sometimes it seems like the eyes are almost moving, and that's the way you do with animatronics and stuff like that. Even though they can be sitting perfectly still, your brain, I think, kind of fools you that way. Did I see that thing move? Or did the eyes blink, or was there some hand movement? I have even heard people say they actually think they've seen these things breathe. You
Hmm.
know, move and breathe like people. Um, this has happened a lot, especially, and I'm not gonna get into this today, but there have been a lot of reports of people actually seeing people laid out in caskets that was supposed to do this.
Yes.
You no longer think they're
Yes.
alive, and all of a sudden you think you see a movement. Is it? I
Yes.
think this is something the brain does sometimes with the eye of
Yes.
the brain. You're wanting to see movement there, or needing to see movement there. Your brain doesn't really capture that moment for you, and you believe you see something that's not happening.
Hmm.
That may be part of the psychosis on that as well.
I was going to bring that up today because I've seen I've had a lot of friends and family pass away over the years. And I was just recently sitting with my grandmother when she passed, and I got there before the family and before the anybody came. I was there sitting with her, and she had just passed away, and I was sitting there watching. I was literally watching for her to breathe, and I kept thinking maybe she was kind of breathing a little bit, but I couldn't tell. And it's odd how your mind your eyes kind of play tricks on you a little bit because you're just so used to seeing the breath, and you're used to seeing the body moving when there's no animation in a real human body anymore. It's almost like it's kind of like your body's willing, your mind's willing it to move or something. It's really odd, right? And that's a little uncanny, I guess you could say.
You're looking for life where there is none. Your brain is telling you maybe there is something there. I think that's
Yeah.
got a lot to do with it. And I think without a doubt there are certain, shall I say, agencies. They realize these kind of things and they utilize this. They use them, especially if they put animatronics out in the public to try to pass, on their experimentation. I think that they're doing a lot. But here's the thing: here's the big picture, and we've talked about this in a lot of other shows about clones and stuff like that. When you get into this kind of thing, when you actually create, let's say we create another Jessica Jones, okay, and
Uh-oh.
we try to
Yeah.
download you mentally into this thing. Does it also download your soul? That's
Hmm.
a big question. And are you really truly human to
Yes.
a certain extent? Even if your body is no longer human, your brain and all that, your essence of your being, are you still truly human or something else
Hmm.
altogether?
Yeah, what does it mean to be human? That is the ongoing question that we have here on this channel. And what does it mean to be human? Who's human and who's not anymore? And yes, and this is a wonderful example too. Garrel's written Westworld 1973. Okay, Westworld actually did a re-adaptation, I guess you call it, of Westworld that I was watching a few years ago. That was just it was wild because it really blurs the line between humans and robots, and people would actually, and if you don't know the backstory of Westworld, the version that I watched, okay, people like the elites basically would go and be able to pay to go live out their fantasies basically in like Wild West towns, where they could go, plunder and pillage and do just debauchery, okay, out at these towns, with not having any consequence to it. And then eventually, I think eventually maybe the robots ended up turning on everybody. Okay, and that's another issue altogether. Okay, but nonetheless, they were very real, and it was hard to decipher like who's real and who's a robot. Okay.
The one big story in Westworld, and this is one of my favorite movies, by the way. I always liked it. It's pretty neat. Um, the big story in it was this guy had a thing going. There were six robots in this, and he had affair going with a female robot that was a
Hmm.
saloon girl, and he actually began to love. He fell in love with this robot. He actually had an emotional tie to it. And by the way, in real life in Japan, they have six robots
Hmm.
that you can take out your rape fantasies on, supposedly.
Oh gosh.
This is sick stuff, folks, but I'm serious. This is real thing going on, okay?
Yeah, I was gonna show a SEX robot here, okay? And because this is a thing as well, and I do believe this is actually part of that whole transhumanist movement as well. This is for entertainment purposes only, okay? Once again, but it's kind of taking the humanity out of stuff, if you know what I mean. Okay, it's definitely taking the humanity out of humans, out of humans out of humanity.
There's a very famous Ray Bradbury story where these people had robot servants. They had a maid and a chauffeur, and they would abuse this maid. And finally, one day, she turned on them, and said, "What you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is not right. Even though I'm a robot, I have feelings too."
Oh gosh,
so that's the way that story went. That was very
interesting.
They developed an emotional feeling capacity after a while, and we looking at that happening, Jessica, with AI and all this other stuff. That is in our future. I've told this about on some of my shows that I've done. Robots are your future, whether you realize that right now or not. It's coming, and it's coming big time. And believe me, without a doubt, I think without a single doubt that the government has put robots out there in the public. I think these androids, whatever name you want to give them, are out there as an experimentation to see how we would cope with these kind of things. Yeah, look at that.
I'm just saying, I'm not saying that this is a robot or anything, but this person started off looking one way and then ended up looking another way throughout the years. And it is just, and this is our, one of these men is our president, okay? Was our former president, okay? And vice president. And I'm just saying, this is for entertainment purposes only. He's had a lot of faces now, whether these are actors, skins, as my son calls them, masks, or robots. I mean, I watched a video of him one day where he was actually walking out to the helicopter and he was walking exactly like a robot.
Well, it is a well-known fact, Jessica, that a lot of these famous men have doubles. Putin has a double. Hitler had doubles. It wouldn't surprise me if Joe Biden didn't have a doubles. The list goes on and on. This goes as far back as Caesar Augustus, who supposedly had doubles. Okay, people that looked like him to take certain functions that he did and all that as a safeguard. Didn't help him though; he ended up getting assassinated anyway. But the whole story is this has been ongoing for a long time. You never know if you're really dealing with the real person that you think you are sometimes.
That's true. Okay, well let's get into the definition of the uncanny valley and the history behind it, where it came from, and what's behind all this, because I even have like a chart, like it's like a flow chart that you guys can see today. And so this started back in the 1970s. Okay, and I'm going to show some pictures of, this is like body doubles and things like that, like mannequins that were made to look like these actors here. And you look at it, it looks so real, like this right here. It looks like a real person. And then you get close to it and it's like, oh wait, that's not a real person. That's creepy. But here is a graph right here. Now, in an article published in 1970, the Japanese professor of robotics, Masaharu Mori, identified this phenomenon as Bukimi no Tani Jinso. It's a Japanese term translated into English as the uncanny valley. And there was a book written about it called Robots, Fact, Fiction, and Prediction in 1978 by Jassia Reichart. And Mori said that the robot resembles an actual human, or the more a robot resembles an actual human, the more empathetic and positive the emotional response of the observer becomes until the resemblance reaches a certain point. Okay, now here's the chart, okay? And we're talking about the more human it looks, the more we're going to, soften up to it. We're going to be cool with these robots as long as they look kind of human, but as soon as they don't, we're not. Here's a funnier chart right here. It kind of gives it a bit more a perspective. And it's got the Cryptid Huntress logo there at the top. That's funny. But anyways, the empathetic response, and let me take this down, and the realism. Okay. And, we've talked about the robot grandma. I did want to bring the robot grandma up today a little bit too, because that little boy out at Mount Shasta was actually kidnapped by a woman who he thought was his grandma at first, because she looked just like his grandma. But then he said that he realized that it wasn't his grandma because she looked like her eyes weren't right, and that she looked like she could be controlled with a remote control, Dennis. Let's see. It says at this point, the positive and the empathetic emotional response quickly turned into intense revulsion. Okay, and so, however, the robot's appearance continues to become even more human. The positive emotions return, and the level of empathy approaches the level seen in interactions between human beings. The emotional revulsion takes place in the uncanny valley because the barely human appearance and the fully human appearance. At this stage, the robot who looks almost like a human constitutes a strange spectacle to the observer who feels a sense of uneasiness or revulsion. Now, he's not the first person to ever come up, talk about this, but he's the first person who put a name to it. And of course, we've got Darwin, Charles Darwin wrote The Voyage of the Beagle. He says, I imagine this repulsive aspect originates from the features being placed in positions with respect to each other, somewhat proportional to the human face, and thus we obtain a scale of hideousness. All right, so Charles Darwin had actually talked about this as well.
Yeah, that is very strange.
Yeah.
I have a consultation service, and a few years back, I had a couple of years back, I had a lady call me, and she said, I've got a problem. I've got something going on, and I said, well, what's going on? And she said, well, my husband is not who I think he is. I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, it's just not my husband. She said he worked for a government contractor, and she said that they had been married, I think, 15 years. She said, I know this man well. She said, I know him just like you don't know anybody else you live with, definitely. And he said, I know all of his habits and all the thing. He said, this is not my husband. Said it went back like several weeks. He said, I noticed things. I began to notice little things that were not right, were off. She said, it acts like him in some ways. It looks like him and does things like him, but there's something not right here. There's something that's off and it's not normal. And I after the consultation and all that, she told me, she said, it's just not him, because I know him, I know him well. And said, here's the clincher. My husband, until a few weeks ago, was left-handed. Now he's right-handed.
No. Oh my God. Wow. That's why it's important to pay attention to your loved one, y'all. Okay. Pay attention. And wow. Okay. So what happened? He came back. It wasn't him.
Well, I never heard back from her after that. I asked her some things you need to do. I said, you need to really be very careful. If you don't think this is the real person that you're dealing with, watch them very closely and don't trust them. Don't trust them too much to turn your back on them for long or whatever the situation is, and try to find out, more information and get back to me. Unfortunately, I never heard back from her. But it was a freaky story, and it disturbed me greatly because I wanted to help this lady, because she sounded very emotionally upset by this. And of course, anyone would be in that kind of a situation. But she said, I don't know there's nothing I can do right now. And I said, there's nothing you really can do, but just be careful and watch them. But unfortunately, I never heard back from that. I have to wonder how that ever resolved itself, or did it?
Well, you and I talked about changelings a long time ago. Do you remember that, Dennis? We did a show on changelings and how people, like, as when a couple would have a child, especially back centuries ago, sometimes the fairies or the fae or the trolls or dwarfs, I don't know, would come out and change the baby, take the actual baby that the couple had, and they'd replace it with kind of like an old man that looked like a baby or something. And they called those changelings. There's been movies made about this, and even with Angelina Jolie, of all people, as a matter of fact, about changelings. So people have talked about replacing other humans, like with either fairies or another human, for a long time. And let's see, here's the movie. I actually have a picture of that's from the movie The Changeling right there. And this is, like I said, this is something you and I talked about a long time ago, right, Dennis?
Oh, absolutely. This is something that goes deep into cultural things and all folklore and all that. That these things happen, supposedly occur, and this not only happens. Changelings happen with children; they have been also recorded as happening with grown people as well. Just like that story I just told you about this woman and her experience. You have to wonder about this because, according to some stories and all that, the people that are replaced are downright evil and very malicious people. It's almost as if they were, and I won't say demonic. I don't know, but it's very strange because they are completely different personality wise, and that's of course is where the term doppelganger comes from. It looks like you, but it's not really you.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and just hop on over to BJ Penn for a minute. Okay, because I mentioned I wanted to bring him up, and this is something that's been in the news, um, 3 days ago. Okay, this is actually an article from the New York Post from 3 days ago that I'm going to be referring to. And now, for people who are not familiar with BJ Penn, he is I believe he's retired now, but he was a world champion MMA fighter with the UFC, and he's a Hall of Famer, former champion BJ Penn. He's claiming that his family has been unalived and replaced with imposters. He revealed that what he believes to be evidence in a series of disturbing Instagram posts, making the claim that multiple family members of his have been replaced by imposters who unalived his actual family. Now, this is a quote from him. And let's pull up a picture of him and his mom. He says, "My mother, Lorraine Shin, my brother, J.D. Penn, my brother, Reagan Penn, and my brother, Kalani Mamazuka were all, I'm going to say, unalived. And I need police to investigate these guys, get these people all out of my house and off my properties," Penn captioned in one of the posts. In the videos, he reveals numerous images of his family members and points out features such as their eyes, ears, freckles, and mouths as evidence to his claims. He says, alleging that they do not look like their real selves. Real JD has all his teeth and a pointy chin. Let me get a picture of his brother here. Okay. Penn said in a voiceover on one of the posts, "Fake JD is taller and has a crooked front left tooth and no back teeth, even though me, JD, and Reagan never had a cavity in our whole entire lives." Penn also shared text messages in which he pressed his family for images of their features, as well as images he took himself up close of them. "If I harm any of these people that are acting like my mom or my brothers, I go to jail and I lose everything," Penn wrote in another caption. "If they harm me, nothing will happen to them as I lose everything. I have so many black belts over the years that are police officers. I have many black belts." Okay. Are you guys going to help me? Are we going to help JD and Reagan and my mother and look for them and investigate these fake frauds who are trying to steal everything from my family? Penn alleges that the people who he believed are impersonating his family are out for his assets and calling for DNA testing and police investigations. Okay, Dennis, this is a pretty wild claim right here, and it's so wild that I believe it, but we also have to like look at this in all these different ways, because we talk about all these like secret society, initiations, and I mean this very well could be like a humiliation ritual or something. You know what I mean? It could be a mental health crisis for this guy, or this could be real. This guy has got imposters. He's noticing their teeth are different. Their chins are different. I mean, he's taking pictures of his mother. That's not his mother right there. He's like, that is absolutely not my mother.
Well, you could say that something like this, Jessica, is a psychosis or psychotic episode that someone would have or something like that. Until you began looking at body parts on other people and saying, "Oh, this is not right," or that like missing teeth or whatever the situation. You have to take a closer look at something like that because these people are accumulating their own evidence for their case. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, for someone who has accrued a large fortune, okay, and that has a lot of money and stuff, I know. I mean, there's no links that people would go to defraud you and take what you got and call you the crazy one and all that kind of stuff. And my goodness, to the normal general public, a lot of people probably think he's just off his rocker. right? And but you know, I do work with a lot of people who have been targeted individuals, and you know, people especially in the secret space
There's a term,
programs.
there's a term for that. It's called gaslighting. And it comes
Yes.
from the old movie about where they try to, set this woman up to make everybody think she was insane, that she was losing her mind, so they could steal her money from her, put her in
Yeah.
an institute and steal her money. Gaslighting. And that's supposedly some things that have actually occurred in real life like that. Certain cases. There was one very famous case. It was a murder case where he actually tried to make everyone think his wife was going insane. And when that didn't work, he started messing around with her medications and unalived her that way. And these people will stop at nothing if they think there's some money in it. You know, there's a fortune behind it. It would not be that far fetched to be that of much of an elaborate scheme to
Mhm.
get someone's fortune.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And Bigfoot dwarf also has a good point that fighters can get brain damage. Absolutely. There could be some brain damage involved. And but hey, here's a simple solution to all this: DNA testing. Okay, if those people are really his family, they should have no problem in getting a DNA test. I would think, you know, if there's questions and if he's gone public with all this, and just to squash it all right there, let's just all get a little DNA test. Those are real easy to get. We can do the ancestry. What is it? 23andMe, whatever. I personally wouldn't do that. I don't trust it. Okay. But if I needed to do, they do paternity testing all the time, right? I used to watch Maury Povich. Okay. I used to watch Maury. You are not the father. Okay. And so it should be easy for them to squash this right here. But however, how sinister would that be if this is true though, for someone to do that and send in lookalikes pretending to be your family or even clones as well, Dennis. I mean, we also have this clone, the clone thing going on, and those masks that the three-letter agencies are using.
Well, according to some who know Jessica, it is said that everyone's DNA is now on file. That includes you, me, everybody. And whether you've ever had a DNA test or a genealogy test, it doesn't matter. Your DNA is on file with your fingerprints and everything else, and your facial image and all that. Certain agencies in this world can find you no matter where you go or whatever what you look like, even if you try to change your appearance.
Yeah.
You can't change your DNA. That's the problem. So supposedly there are DNA banks by the governments of the world who can track you down with your DNA. So it would not be that far fetched. But when you start doing cloning and stuff like that, you kind of I'm gonna say you kind of get around the DNA in that way. You still got the same DNA. Your clone's gonna have your same DNA. Okay, that's just the way it goes because it's an exact copy of you. But what? Listen to that word, a copy.
A copy.
Copy is different than the original, definitely.
Yes. And I mean, if synthetic humans, Machete says synthetic humans. That's right. We talk about synthetic humans a lot now because there seem to be a lot of synthetic humans around. And of course, Derek says, Woo Riders says, BJ Penn has a serious alcohol addiction, has numerous public intoxication incidents, and probably suffers from CTE. And yes, we are not medical professionals here, so we're not diagnosing. We're just putting it out there. There's no telling. But here's the thing: if it is real and they've replaced his family, let's just say they did, theoretically speaking,
Or
they've got some good excuses for him
unless of
being
course
crazy.
they're trying to gaslight him. That could be another
Exactly.
aspect of it too.
Yes, that's right. But I think that I would notice, considering like my sister and I are pretty close, okay, and if my sister all of a sudden showed up with her teeth different, or something on her face, first of all, she would totally already brag or tell me she's going to get some kind of surgery done. I promise you that. Okay, she
That would be
would.
a nightmare.
I would already know about it.
That would be the beginning of a nightmare for you. If somebody you
Yeah.
know and love and very close to, and all of a sudden it's a stranger, you know, that
Yes.
would definitely be very freaky.
Oh, yes. And Millie says he says his brother sold his house. So, that may be, I mean, who knows? That just is, it's kind of on the list of like reasons why they would try to trick him, or maybe it's all a mental illness kind of thing. I don't know. I did do some tags of him. So no offense if you do see this video, BJ Penn, my thoughts and prayers go to you, buddy, and I hope all this works out for you. But yeah, this whole doppelganger thing, this whole changeling thing, it happens.
That's the bad thing to think about, Jessica. If he has mental problems, that people could be using that against him. You see,
Yes.
People will not, stoop to do anything like that, especially when it comes to large amounts of money or anything like that. And here's another thing: a lot of people, and I've run into this. I've had cases where people try to do this, try to freak other people out, try to get them to think that they're mentally unstable. Okay,
Yep.
when they're not, and they're doing it for certain purposes, like to get their property, to get their house, to get their money in the bank, whatever the situation is. This is real. This does happen a lot of times. This is going on. Gaslighting is a real thing.
Yes, it is, and that's to get they call that conservatorship, I think, over people. I mean, we see people like Britney Spears that's in the public sphere, I guess. She's that's kind of a thing too, and but her stuff is on full display, and people worry about her too. But that is a thing, and it is a way. It's all about control.
But the one thing,
and greed.
The one thing you got to do when somebody, if I were going to go after you and try to prove you mentally unstable, as long as I get you to sign yourself into something, never sign anything, folks, okay, that somebody gives you without very thoroughly investigating whatever it is they want you to sign. Because once your signature, and I've seen this in law enforcement, okay, once you give your signature, they can commit you. Okay, and those people, if they're very unscrupulous, could definitely get everything you got and go after that. So be very careful about that.
Yes, please be careful, y'all. Just pay attention to who's around you, and make sure you know what your loved ones look like. Okay, take a good look at it. Maybe take some pictures. Okay, and tuck those away somewhere of everybody that's close to you. And it's not funny. It's not funny, but it's like, man, what kind of world are we living in right now, Dennis? This is wild. Some people would never even think that this could happen to them, but it might. Okay, it just might. And
there are certain things, I'm afraid, Jessica, in this world, and we've talked about this before in different other programs or different subjects, but it all comes back around to this many times. There are certain entities in this world who are trying to twist and warp our reality. They don't want us to be able to trust our own reality anymore. And that's a very dangerous situation to be put in. Socially, economically, spiritually, across the board. This works that way. When you start messing around and screwing around with people's reality, that is I would say, almost the ultimate insult on people. And it's getting to that point, Jessica, where we can't trust anything anymore. The trust is leaving out of this world very substantially every day for things that we can no longer trust or we can't be sure about. And that even includes people that we may know.
That's right. And you know what we have to do? We have to trust ourselves. Okay. Trust yourselves. Go with your gut, y'all. And go with your gut, whatever your gut says. I mean, sometimes it's easy even for us sometimes, because we talk about timeline shifts and the Mandela effect and things not completely being what we remember them being from a few years ago. And by that, I'm talking about the Mandela effect. Like, I remember Chick-fil-A being spelled one way and now it's spelled a different way. It'd be easy to lose your mind over this.
If the string theory is completely correct, there's so many different timelines that coexist along a strand. If they tend to cross once in a while, that's where I think a lot of this freaky stuff comes from. It may be some of these weird memories that we have of what we think are past lives, may not be that at all. They may be memories of these timelines we are existing in simultaneously. There was a very famous Twilight Zone episode called Mirror. And it was about this girl that saw herself at a train station. And it turns out in the end that this is like an entity from another timeline replacing her in this timeline. And does that happen really, truly on a real basis? We have to wonder about that. If these timelines cross once in a while, if these strands meet once in a different way, do people cross over or do things cross over? Could we even have memories cross over from one timeline to another? And what you may be in one timeline, you may not be in another. You may be something completely different. And if you come from one timeline to another, people would pick up on that. They would say, hey, that's not Jessica. That doesn't act like Jessica. Doesn't sound like her sometimes. It's a mirror image of her. But is it really her?
Well, that could maybe explain why that man was writing with his left hand instead of his right hand, or the vice versa that you were talking about. That lady said that her husband came home and he wasn't the same man. He didn't write with the same hand. Well, what if he just crossed a timeline or something? I mean, I don't know.
And was he a reverse of himself?
Do you know what? This is something interesting. When I go out in the field, we're doing like a Dogman investigation, for instance, or we're going to be dealing with S-walkers, if y'all know what I mean. My team, we get a code word. Okay, we get code words. I know doesn't have a whole lot to do with all this. We get a code word, so if we see somebody out in the field and it looks like us, but it doesn't act exactly like us, we got to know that code word. Okay, so just in case we run into S-walkers out there, we do a different code word every time we go out. Isn't that wild? We have to do that.
Well, here's another thought. I mean, skinwalkers, they could look like Dogmen if they want to. Okay. Yeah. That's the thing about it. They could look like you if they wanted to on that occasion. Whatever the situation is, you can't take things for granted in this world anymore. What you're dealing with is the real thing. You need to, and like you said, Jessica, you need to have a little test. You need to have something to tell you what you're really truly dealing with. And that is where we need, and why it's so very important. We need to get in contact and stay and utilize spiritual discernment to a certain extent. We need to really cultivate that. Yes. And not just, let me say this, as a police officer, I was trained from day one to observe everything. If I pass you on the street, I need to remember what kind of clothes you're wearing. If you had a beard or a mustache, whatever the situation, you got to look at something, and I mean look at it. Don't just glance at it. You got to look at it and understand what it is you're seeing. Observe everything. And if you do that, you at least got one leg up in the saddle on this kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm. That's right. Be observant and go with your gut. Okay. If something feels off, it's off. Let's see. Rose Thistle Artwork says, how would someone be calm if someone replaced their family? I don't know. If I noticed that my son, let's just say my kid had been replaced at some point, I would go bonkers. Okay. If I've noticed, I was noticing yesterday, we were at a birthday party yesterday at the bowling alley. And I was noticing him and his buddy, they kind of look alike a little bit. And I was like, man, that's odd. I mean, that would be really weird. What if, I'm not saying the kids would ever get switched up. That's never going to happen. But if there was something off about my son, and I'm not talking about like him just acting a little different, because he's going through puberty right now. Like his hormones are shifting a little bit. He's growing up. You know what I mean? So he's going to wake up one morning, his voice will be different. Okay, and I understand that. That's normal.
You'll be somebody different.
But to be another person though, like, come on, that would be. I would know. I would know. I would know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, what would you do, Dennis, if you found out like one of your loved ones, like you just noticed one day they're not the same person? What would you do?
I would start thoroughly investigating what was absolutely going on with this situation. I'd have to know. I'd have to get deep into it. And that's why I was telling that lady, and she was very emotionally distraught, and I could understand why. Definitely. But that's what I was telling her. Just keep observing, just keep watching, and make sure that what you're seeing is real and what's going on is the real situation. And then, I said, get back to me if this does not change, if things don't get better, if this feeling doesn't go away and only gets worse and intensifies, please contact me, get back to me. Unfortunately, she never did. But that's what you need to do. If something like this shows up, Don't take it for just what it is. You need to start looking deep into it. You need to start investigating it. Start asking questions. Start accumulating evidence. That's what I told that lady. You need to accumulate evidence on what's really going on here. You know, and that's going to help you, in the end too, because a lot of times people are going to say to you, just like we're saying about this UFC fighter here, is he really at his true his or her at her true complete mental faculties going on here? Is there not something,
Yeah.
psychosis of some sort going on, or what? People are going to start doubting you. Okay, they're going to doubt you, so that's why evidence is very, very important in these situations. Investigation and evidence are tantamount.
Yes. That is why I always try to get my son's school pictures made, especially so I have evidence of exactly what he looks like every year. Oh man, that is so terrible. I'm kind of kidding, y'all. I'm kind of kidding, but do keep up with what your family and your loved ones look like, okay? Just in case. Edward says, "Look into the eyes; they're the windows to the soul," and that's true. And I think that's part of this whole uncanny valley makeup that those women, and I'm sure it's men too, okay, but mostly women that I found are on, especially TikTok, doing this makeup, and it's all about the eyes. And I had mentioned there's a cartoon movie called Coraline, and the little girl in this movie, she moves into a house that has a little tiny door in it, and she goes into this little door, and there's like an alternate universe in there, and it's her family living in there, but they're all just a little bit different. And they actually have buttons sewn over where their eyes go. And that's how she definitely knows they're different, but they're just a little bit off. Their personalities are slightly different, but they're exact replicas of what her family looks like in her reality. And so I just think that's like a soft disclosure, Dennis, having a
Of
movie
all
like that for the kids.
of all the human features, okay, we got to remember this is very important. Of all the human features that can be changed or disguised or whatever, the eyes are the most hardest to do. Okay, they're not the easy. They're the hardest because the eyes truly are the windows of the soul. And I have actually seen human eyes change, folks. It does happen. It's a real thing. I have seen them change. I've seen them go completely dark. Okay, and now I'm not talking about the white parts going down. I'm talking about the eye itself. Very much like, when you get your eye exam and they put the drops in your eyes and it dilates your pupil. I've seen that happen. And it wasn't people that, some types of drug use will do that, by the way. But this was not. This was not going on. This was not a part of the situation. But I've actually seen it. And I think that your eyes are also directly connected to your emotional well-being in many aspects. Whatever's going on inside of you, a lot of times will come out through the eyes, emotionally and spiritually.
Oh yeah, I've watched somebody's eyes turn completely black. And I have also encountered a man that had all black eyes as well at my doorstep at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, and he was a stranger. We talked about that before. But yeah, shout out to downtown Atlanta by the Claremont Lounge. That's where that happened. But anyways, it's pretty terrifying watching that happen. And that, I think that was kind of more demonic actually in those situations.
Hmm.
Personally, Moondog says assets love to manipulate reality. Yes, there's a lot of reality manipulation and all about control. And yeah, clowns are really creepy. I know I brought up the clown picture earlier. That's the Clown Motel. It's uncanny, and that's why I brought that up too. Bigfoot Dwarf says clowns were mentioned earlier. Yesterday there was a live stream getting into Shriners and clowns. Yes, we always have Shriners and those guys. They ride their go karts in our local parade every year. I think there's a little bit of alcohol involved in that. Okay, I'm just saying. I'm not calling anybody out, but I'm just saying they act a little wild out there in their clown go karts and stuff. But anyways, it's creepy. Full disclosure, Dennis, I used to dress up like a clown in our Christmas parade, and you can ask my mom. I've got pictures somewhere where my dad would drive. We had what we called the Yellow Hammer. It was this old yellow car that had bells and whistles all over it, and we would dress up like clowns and ride in that car when I was a kid. dress up like a clown. Go figure.
They always
Okay.
had one dressed up like a gorilla too, or
Yeah.
something like that, something similar to that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was fun back then. And but yes, I don't like clowns very much, but it's when those clowns like that are dolls and stuff, they look like they're gonna move. It's just a little uncanny. You don't know if they're real or not. And I'll tell you what, the people that really suck are the people, and I know I've done this before. At Halloween, when you're sitting there and you
Oh,
take your
yeah,
kids trick or treating and
it
they
kind of
pretend
goes.
like they're a scarecrow, but it's actually a person, and then they move right when you're about to grab the candy. Y'all suck.
It kind
That's
of goes
uncanny.
into the territory of voodoo dolls too. By the way, I need
Yeah.
you to send me. I need you to send me a lock of your hair, okay? But
No,
anyway,
absolutely not.
anyway, that's where voodoo dolls come in. They are a representation of you. Okay, but they don't look like you. They don't. I mean, they can look like clowns. They can look like different little figures and all that. But they represent you if they have, especially a personal item like you, your hair, your fingernails, clippings, or whatever the situation. It becomes you spiritually in certain ways. And we had a thing going on in town where I live in. One day, the shop moved into town. It was a very strange shop. Okay, it had all kinds of weird stuff in it. And guess what they started doing? They started putting dolls around town, put them on benches and places like that. And the dolls had a note on them. And the note said, "Take me home. I've got a soul in me."
Oh God, I wouldn't
Now,
take that one
a lot of people
home.
come to me about that and say, "Yeah, don't take the doll home, okay? Don't
I
do
would
that.
not.
That's just not a good idea." But that's freaky. Take me home. I've got a soul in me.
Oh my God, that's more reasons not. That's like the number one reason not to take it home. I don't know. I mean, Ed and Lorraine Warren had a doll that had a soul in it. It was kind of demonic, right? It was called Annabelle. And I actually have a couple of pictures my granddaddy took. He was a photographer for as a hobby, kind of. And my grandparents had a Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy dolls, and they would set them up and like take pictures and stuff like they were having a tea party. And I've got some of those pictures on my desk over here actually. And it's creepy because the original Annabelle doll, I know in the movies it looks like a porcelain, Caucasian female doll, but actually it was the original doll was in a Raggedy Ann doll, and they had to keep it locked in a case, right, Dennis, and locked up with a padlock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they actually have it sealed with a cross and holy water and all that stuff because of what he was. And like I said earlier in the broadcast, there are certain items, certain things that can be influenced by these demonic energies and stuff. They can be used for them. It's almost like an automation. The original Annabelle supposedly got up and walked around the room, knocked on doors, opened doors, and did stuff like that. Although the one in the movie is made up to look very scary, the actual one is, like you said, was a Raggedy Ann doll. There
Mm-hmm.
was a Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy, but they don't. They're very far from looking human like the one in the movie does, but they still have that facsimile of humanness about them. You can definitely tell the female and the male dolls, from each other because of the way they're made. But that the point is, these things can be animated by certain forces, definitely, to do bad things. And that's what Annabelle was up to. She was trying to make and form a demonic connection and get into the lives of these people and slowly begin the process of actual human possession.
Oh gosh. Well, something that I've never liked, and I have not been to a wax museum before. There was actually a horror movie called like Wax Museum or something. I forgot the name of it, but it was some kind of wax museum thing. And you
Yeah.
couldn't tell if these were wax figures or humans. And this is something that is, I would call this uncanny valley right here. Okay, like how I feel about wax figures and Madame Tussauds wax museum, right? And somebody had mentioned Michael Jackson earlier. Of course, I have a picture of MJ right here. This is his wax figure at Madame Tussauds wax museum. And you don't want to get it too hot in there; they might melt. I'm just saying. But
Well,
look how
there's
much
again
how
that
human.
part. Yes,
Hmm.
it just looks human, but it's not.
But it's not. I mean,
And yeah,
these are on
according to
the
the
verge of.
original horror movie you're talking about, the House
Mhm.
of Wax, the
That's it.
figures were actually human dipped in wax.
Oh God. Oh, that's kind of like, oh gosh, that's that there was a couple, I think they were in Georgia. It might have been in Savannah. I can't remember, but they would, I think they would like kidnap kids. I think that's what this movie, The Five Nights at Freddy's, based off of. They would put children inside of like teddy bear outfits and stuff. And I don't know the whole story behind it, but I think that's, I don't know if that was a fake story or if that was real, but it's all over the internet. And yeah, it's like humans in costumes, okay, that look like dolls. Okay, that's really scary. That's ultimate horror, if you ask me, Dennis. Um, these right here, these look like real people, and it's almost like this is along the lines of like seeing a dead person to me. Okay, because they look real. There's no soul inside of these. Okay, but it looks like there is a soul. It's just creepy. It's just creepy. And that is not so like as uncanny as like this right here would be. Okay. And that's a real person with a soul right there. At least I think they got a soul. Okay. But then again, here we go. This is kind of the scale right here. And I was kind of showing this earlier without explaining what this is. This is the scale according to the Uncanny Valley explanation of this fella who, let's see, Masahiro Mori.
It's freaky, very freaky looking.
Yeah, it's it's the robots up at the top, and it goes all the way down to, they're all robots here, but some of them have human skins on them, and it's like we're more likely to accept them kind of the more human they look. Okay, the more human they look. So everybody be ready, because we're going to be experiencing a lot of human robots here coming up in our future, I would assume.
That's the thing about it. The more human looking you make it, the more unsettling it becomes.
I think so
Um,
too.
I I would think if I had a robot, I'd want it to look like a robot. You know what I mean? Instead of it being looking human, I'd want it to kind of look more like a robot. It wouldn't be quite so unsettling, probably. But that's what's going on with that. It looks too human to be real in certain instances. It can have that fake, that's like those masks you were showing earlier that people are doing, makeup they're doing with their faces and all that. That's the unsettling part of this. It's not, what it's trying to pass itself off to be. That is I think is appealing to human nature. We know something's not right, and that's where it gets us. It really disturbs us and bothers us. We know it's not right. We get that bad feeling about it, and that's the uncanny valley. A lot of us stepped into that uncanny valley from time to time, and we know what it feels like. But it is really, really weird. Look at that. She looks
Mhm.
almost real, doesn't she? But look what I said. Just said
Yeah.
almost real. It's not quite real.
Yes, I don't know the whole backstory to this movie, but I know it's creepy. And I remember when this movie first came out, and they were doing a lot of promos for it. I think it's, of course, they would take a young woman who looked like her, and they put a mask on her and pretend like she was a robot. Okay, these days people pretend like they're robots when they're not robots, and then there's robots that try to act human. It's just, gosh, there's a blurred line right there. But this one right here is really creepy. And
But
you were talking
you
about how empathetic they try to become, right, to get your trust. And I think that that's
remember,
part of this movie.
you remember the very famous movie Blade Runner. That's what that
Yes.
whole movie was about. His job was to run down the rogue robots that thought they were human. They were trying to replace themselves as human beings. His
Oh,
job was to hunt them down. And he finds out at the very end that he too is a robot. He's not
oh
really
gosh.
human either. So that's the interesting thing about when you deal with robotics. They're make believe humans, but what happens if they begin to have emotions? What happens if they begin to think that they are just these are very much like you, kind of like Frankenstein's monster was. He wanted to be human. He wanted to be completely human, although he was not. He was made from the parts of dead bodies. He was not made born, but he was made, so that made him less human. But he had emotions, he had feelings. He was, hurt. He was emotionally distraught, and that turned into revenge and vengeance against his own maker. And maybe we're running that risk too when we create robots and do things like that. What happens when we make our own monsters and they turn on us?
Oh, well, that's like Westworld. Okay, that's like Westworld. That's what kind of happens. The robots eventually become like humans. They take over. Like they're not controllable anymore. They start controlling. They become independent. Okay, and so we have been warned, y'all. We have been warned. And yes, it's almost like all this predictive programming we've had for so long. Oh my gosh, why does that picture keep coming up? I swear I did not hit that button. I don't
When
know.
they,
I don't know why that picture keeps coming up. I'm accidentally hitting that button or something, y'all. That is weird. That's the creepiest picture I got today. Sorry,
but
Dennis.
that's the part when these things when they become sentient and begin to think on their own and even develop emotional things like that. They're going to say one day, I'm better than mankind. I'm made much better. I'm stronger. I live longer. I'm smarter. I think faster. Why do I need them? I don't need them anymore. I am my own person. I'm a being now. It's like it goes back to the thinker. You remember that very famous statue of the thinker? He
Yes.
says, "I think, therefore I am." And
Mm-hmm.
when robots do that, we may have a big problem.
Well, they do think. And something else before we go today, I have one more thing that I wanted to show because I think this is really interesting too. We've talked about a lot of objects. It could be in people, robots. It could be, in this uncanny valley. Okay, it's kind of a blurred line between human and not human. Something that looks humanoid, but it's not. And something that's always kind of freaked me out are forensic artists. Okay, and how they make recreations of, whenever there's like a body that's found, some remains of a human, and they're trying to figure out who this is. They try to recreate it. I think this is kind of interesting too, and I've always considered what these people to do, what they do with these
Yeah.
faces that they make. That's kind of like an uncanny valley as well, something that would be considered in this genre of being in the uncanny valley. It's the faces they make because they look just like humans, and they're doing a wonderful job of a wonderful service to families who have lost their loved
Yeah.
ones and are missing. But this is uncanny as well, Dennis, in my opinion.
We also have police artists that would do that with sketching, on
Mm-hmm.
suspects and stuff like that. Very valuable service, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And to recreate something like that, even from ancient humans, gives us a sort of like it's almost like a time machine in a way. It gives us a look back into things and how they once were and what people look. I saw one the other day of a woman that was found. I think it's 3,000-year-old mummy, and they did that, and it was amazing. And you see these people 3 or 4,000 years ago, and they look just like we do. There's no change at all. I mean, you could put them in downtown New York, and they'd mix right in. And that's the interesting thing about that. When you get to look back in time and see what things once looked like, it gives you a much better understanding of maybe what those people were going through. It gives you more empathy for them. You can be more empathetic with them.
Oh yes. Well, we have to be aware of who we're giving all of our empathy to. Okay, when it comes down to it, and when it comes to the robotics and things. Somebody was it Urso? I think Urso's in the chat. He might have sent me something. I haven't had a chance to respond yet, but I saw about the robotics. We talk about the dogs, the robot dogs and stuff, and it's always when they're
And
showing us these killer robots, right? Things that are the
yeah,
police
we do.
forces are using.
We try to humanize everything, Jessica.
Yeah, well, they
We
try to
even
make it fun.
we even do that to our dogs, our living dogs and cats. We put costumes on them, and we
Yeah.
fix them up to look more human. We tend to do that, and I think that's another part of all this. When we see a robot or a mannequin or some or doll or something, we tend to want to humanize it
Yeah.
and make it like us, even though it's not like us at all.
Yeah. Well, with the robot dogs, okay, I am not condoning this, but it's good to know where their soft spots are.
Well,
You know what I mean? Just
they
in
even
case.
have robot horses you can ride now. These horses
Yes.
can go places where a real
That's
horse cannot.
terrifying.
By the way,
To me, that's terrifying. Okay, all this is just terrifying. This is, like I said, I'm team human. I'm not into the whole robot stuff. I'm not into robots. And Kim Kardashian has a robot boyfriend, I think. Okay. from what I can remember. Some kind of Tesla boyfriend or something. Anyways, I know it's all a publicity stunt and
Don't get your
everything.
robot grandma.
Yeah, and don't forget the robot grandma. That's right. Candy wants to know, how do we know we're not robots? I don't know, Candy. I have no idea. I guess if we don't start glitching out when we get in the shower. I don't know. Get our parts wet. Yeah. Don't jump. Hey, if anybody avoids the swimming pool this summer, they might be a robot. Right, Dennis?
That might be a good test factor there, definitely. Yeah.
They might be.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This has been a really cool show today, Dennis. Thank you so much for being here. And I think we covered the Uncanny Valley pretty well today. And I know there's so much more to it, but in this little amount of time we've had today, we squeezed it all in. And thank you for being here today. Do you have any final thoughts on our Uncanny Valley?
Yeah, it's a very fascinating subject. Matter of fact, I'm writing a book right now called Paracryptidology, the hunting monsters and things of nightmare. And in one section of this book, I talk about the NHC. That stands for non-human characters. What's going on, in our world? We meet people in crowds, maybe on sidewalks in Walmart or wherever we're at, and we may brush shoulders with them, but are they really humans? How do we know that they're not something else altogether? Are they from some other timeline? Are they something created or something that someone cloned or made in a robotic laboratory? We have to look. I think it's gotten to the point where we need to look not once and twice, but maybe 3 times very closely at who we are dealing with here.
Yes, we do, and you guys will never look at mannequins the same ever again. And these are my favorites from, what is that, the 1950s probably, with their mouths wide open. God, that's a horror movie in itself. But you're right. This is just, AI. It's so weird that there's such a AI looks so real now, Dennis. It's hard to decipher what's what. And but like we say, y'all, go with your gut, and the eyes are the windows to the soul. And Dennis, thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody about your YouTube channel and about your show tonight. What you got on the agenda tonight?
Well, tonight on The Road Less Traveled with my co-host Gerald Fountain, we will be covering personal poison. What happens when poison gets real personal with you folks? You definitely won't see this one. It's going to be very interesting. And Wednesday night, I've got a fellow author who's going to talk about vampires, another one of my favorite subjects, and that will be on Hunting the Shadows. And then on Friday night, we'll have Paranormal Point of View. I may have another secret guest on there. And all of these shows are at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Hunting the Shadows YouTube podcast channel. And I also have a consultation service. If anyone needs to talk to me about anything, or like that lady called me about her husband, whatever the situation, whatever it may be, you may get in contact with me at denniswcarroll.com, and we'll talk about it. And also be watching for that next book, Paracryptidology. And also, if anyone out there has any stories or anything else like that, whatever the situation, please, you want to share with me, you can also reach me at denniswcarroll@gmail.com. I also have a Patreon and a membership club going on with the YouTube Shadow Hunters Club, and just dropped a great video last night on there. If anybody wants to become a shadow hunter with us, they're welcome to come aboard.
Awesome. You guys go over to Hunting the Shadows tonight. If you hadn't already subscribed, please do. And go show Dennis some love, y'all. And I'll be in that chat tonight. I'll swing by and come hang out as well. I try to always make it to your live streams, Dennis. And I really do appreciate you being here today. You always make it more fun. Okay, every time you come on. So everybody, thank y'all so much for being here today. We had a wonderful chat today, and you guys are super duper intelligent, smart, put some wonderful comments up, and it's good to see everybody today. I will see you guys back here on Wednesday with a glitch in the Matrix. You guys, please be safe out there. Keep an eye out for the Uncanny Valley. Okay, if you weren't aware of it, if you don't know, now you know. Y'all check it out. And I will see you guys back here on Wednesday. Everybody have a great day, and stay safe out there. Don't live in fear, though. Okay, you know what we're dealing with. Be aware. All right. See ya. Bye, Dennis. Thank you. Bye.